hypothetical scenario that has a lot of the country mulling over it. That question, would Jesus vote for ACT? Now, of course, this debate was sparked by ACT leader David Seymour's claim that Christ would back his party. So many people have shared their opinion, and we're going to be talking about it right now with Matt Maslin from Laidlaw College. He's got a few thoughts on this one, and he joins me on the show today. Well, firstly, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you here, Matt.
Great to be here.
So it is, shall I say, the $1 million question, the 11 denarii question, whatever it would be. Would Jesus vote for ACT? Would he even vote for any political party? I'd be interested to know your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, and really, we should contextualize it a wee bit where it does seem like David Seymour is making a comment in jest and making a humorous response to a question that was pitched to him. So, does he actually believe the Son of God would vote for him? You'd have to ask him. Sometimes I think maybe he would believe that. But you've already raised this question, like, would Jesus vote for anyone? And I'm really not sure he would. And it seems to me, when you read the Gospels, Jesus came to embody a way of being in the world rather than to advocate for a political system. And he kind of was quite prickly towards the empire throughout the Gospels. And also in the season of Lent, we think about the time that Jesus was tested in the wilderness, right? And we see in that story that he's tempted with all the authority of the kingdoms of the world. And so he could have established a worldly government, but instead he chose to establish the church, led by the Spirit, to kind of be like the polis of God, essentially. So would Jesus vote? Unlikely. Would Jesus vote for Seymour? I would think probably not as well. And I don't think generally you'd find Jesus at the polls. I think you'd find him with the poor. But I think this whole conversation has raised an interesting question around the philosophy that David Seymour has as a politician, of this libertarian philosophy. Is that compatible with the teachings of Christ? Is this something Christians should get excited about or not excited about? And what are the good parts and what are some of the issues that we might find?
Well, I'd be interested then, given that it is one of the major parties here in New Zealand, or at least, in government. Let's look at those philosophies. Libertarianism. This may be sort of a new concept for some people listening. Can we just firstly kind of delve into what is it? And what are some of perhaps the good things about it in your mind, and some of the challenges with it?
Yeah. So libertarianism is kind of a political system of philosophy which really emphasizes individual freedom and responsibility against kind of government intervention. And so it's got some key things that define it. So one of them is the free market. So this idea that of the kind of best kind of economy is one where there's unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. That's going to create the best kind of economic environment for us. And so it's interesting when you read kind of free market politics, it almost has a kind of religious or spiritual undertone to how it works. And there's the kind of great Scottish philosopher and economist Adam Smith. He talked about the invisible hand of the free market, and his kind of idea was that when the free market is freed from the government, it becomes self-regulating in a way that produces like optimal outcomes for society. And I'm skeptical of this. I think if you came face to face with Jesus and he asked what we did for the poor, and you said, I was just leaving it to the invisible hand of the free market to create optimal outcomes for them, I wonder if Jesus would say, did you try using your real hands?
I wonder.
I'm skeptical of whether this is the free market does actually produce optimal outcomes. But we've got to recognize the great things that the free market has done and the kind of high standard of living it's created for people in the West. But is it this kind of fear magical thing that always produces the best benefits for all of society? I would say not. And there's some problems around things that kind of exacerbate inequality, like the rich often have inheritance, and that's not due to their contribution to the free market. That's just who they've been related to, or paying for school or education. There's kind of the admissions scandals in the US that says people can get ahead much easier when they already have money, and just their general ability to accumulate wealth and to kind of monopolize power is I think it can be problematic.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could say that the free market is a big part of libertarianism. Minimal government intervention is another one. They don't like tax. They think, hardcore libertarians would say all taxation is a form of theft. It's your money, you earned it. And if you don't like tax, then you don't really like the government offering public services, because taxes are what pays for public services. And so you kind of see this in our government already, this kind of pulling back of public services. And that is actually motivated by a libertarian philosophy, really.
So, yeah, I mean, we've talked about libertarianism, but there's all sorts of different philosophies from people who probably see that countries and the world could be run in such a way that it would prove to have the best outcomes for absolutely everyone. And, there's all different types. People talk about communism, socialism, democracy. But, and we've talked about what Jesus or who Jesus would vote for. But is there one best one, or is there the Jesus way? And if there's a Jesus way, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky thing, because the way we interpret scripture is so vast. But I mean, I think there's a good measuring stick for how we engage in politics, which is what's Jesus's manifesto, really? Good news to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, release of the captives, and liberty for the oppressed. And so amongst those ideas or concepts, there's kind of a spiritual undertone to all of those things, but there's also political undertones to those priorities as well. Good news to the poor involves like wages, and recovery of sight to the blind involves healthcare, and release of the captives involves geopolitics, and liberty for the oppressed, that involves equity and advocating for the least of these. So these, there's no one way, but there are these core values that Jesus espouses, which I think are really important for us to keep focused on. And I think sometimes in politics, we're forced to make false distinctions. And I think that's what's happening here in libertarianism as well, is this choice of like individual freedom and or individual responsibility and government responsibility. And usually we choose to pick a camp, right? We're all about the government leaving us alone, or we've got a much more socialized view of society. And I think if we're thinking about how to care for the poor, the oppressed, to make things equitable, we actually need to hold both things. What can we do individually? How do we create communities where people are taking responsibility for their own lives? But also, how do we structure society in a way that helps all people to flourish and for the lowly to be raised up? And so I think this is important for thinking Christianly about these kind of things, is who is our allegiance to? Is it to one of these camps, which we kind of see play off against each other, or is it to follow the way of Christ, which is, a way of advocating for the poor and for the oppressed and for the sick?
So much food for thought this morning, Matt. And it's not just that one simple question, would Jesus vote for ACT? But there is a whole lot more going on in there. And then bringing it back to, what can we do with our hands and feet today in terms of lifting all of society up? Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Matt Maslin from Laidlaw College. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Rhema. Now, if you found value in today's content, hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel with the subscribe button. This really helps us to continue to produce more quality content for you. And hey, if you'd like to stay updated and never miss any of our future videos, ring that notification bell as well. Don't forget to follow us on our other socials, which are in the description below. And until then, stay tuned.